The first time I realized my family had already decided my future without me was the day I was removed from a company I helped build. Not fired, not laid off, erased. The email arrived at 7:12 a.m., flagged as urgent, sent by my older brother, Daniel Whitmore. The subject line read, "Board update, effective immediately." I opened it standing in my kitchen, coffee untouched, still wearing the sweatshirt I slept in. After careful consideration, the board has agreed it's best for you to step back from operational decisions. This is about stability, not punishment. That was it. No meeting, no warning, no discussion. Just a quiet decision that stripped me of authority in a company that still carried my fingerprints in every process, every contract, every early morning crisis we survived. If you've ever been pushed out of your own life by people who call it concern, pause for a second. Like, comment, or subscribe. Not because this is entertainment, but because stories like this have a way of sounding familiar when you least expect them to. My name is Lauren Whitmore. I was 33 years old when my family decided I was no longer trustworthy. The company was Whitmore Logistics Group, a mid-sized freight coordination firm based in Columbus, Ohio. We specialized in time-sensitive medical and industrial shipments across the Midwest. I wasn't a figurehead. I wasn't support staff. I was director of operations. I built the routing algorithms, negotiated carrier contracts, managed a team of 42 dispatchers and analysts. When COVID disrupted supply chains, I worked 18-hour days to keep hospitals supplied. Revenue doubled in 3 years. My brother, Daniel Whitmore, the official CEO, liked to say he was the visionary. Our father, Thomas Whitmore, liked to say this was always Daniel's company. I like to say nothing. Growing up, I learned early that quiet competence was less threatening than ambition. Daniel was 4 years older, louder, charismatic, the kind of man people assumed should lead because he spoke confidently, not because he listened well. Our mother, Patricia Whitmore, called him driven. She called me difficult. When Daniel dropped out of his MBA program at 26, my parents rallied around him. When I worked nights to finish my industrial engineering degree, they told me not to burn myself out over nothing. When Daniel proposed starting the company, I was the one who wrote the operational plan. I didn't ask for equity. I asked for responsibility. That was my mistake. The first sign something was shifting came 6 months before the email. We were in a board meeting, just family and 2 outside advisors. Daniel sat at the head of the table, our father beside him. I was presenting quarterly performance metrics when Daniel interrupted. "Let's keep it high level," he said. "No need to overwhelm everyone." I stopped mid-sentence. "These numbers explain why our margins improved," I said calmly. Daniel smiled thinly. "Trust me," he said. "They don't need to understand the details." No one corrected him. After that, decisions started happening without me. Small ones at first. Vendor changes, staffing approvals, budget reallocations. When I asked about it, my mother said, "Daniel just wants to protect you from stress." Protect. That word appeared often when control was being disguised as care. The incident that triggered everything happened at a regional transportation conference in Chicago. I had been invited to speak on a panel about adaptive logistics under federal compliance changes. A big deal. Industry visibility. Daniel attended with me. So did our father. After the panel, a representative from a national healthcare network approached me. He asked about our proprietary scheduling model and requested a follow-up meeting. Before I could respond, Daniel stepped in. "Lauren handles internal operations," he said. "I'll be your point of contact." The man nodded politely and turned to Daniel. I stood there, smiling, feeling something shift behind my ribs. That night, in the hotel lobby, I confronted my brother. "That was my lead," I said quietly. Daniel laughed. "Don't be territorial," he said. "We're family." Family. That word again. 2 weeks later, my system access was limited. Not revoked, just restricted. When I asked IT, they said the request came from Daniel and was approved by Thomas Whitmore. I went home that night and reviewed my employment agreement. At will. No equity. No board seat. I had built a machine I didn't own. The final blow came disguised as compassion. My mother invited me to dinner. Just her, Daniel, and our father. Patricia Whitmore served pot roast and spoke softly. "We've been worried about you," she said. "You've been so intense." Daniel nodded. "Always working," he added. maybe too much. Thomas Whitmore folded his hands. "We think it's best if you step back," he said. "Focus on yourself." "From what?" I asked. "The company," my father replied. "You've been emotional." Emotional. That word hit harder than any insult. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't argue. I asked one question. "Who decided this?" Daniel answered without hesitation. "We did." That night, I went home and opened my laptop. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I started documenting. Because when people tell you to step back quietly, it's rarely about your well-being. It's about removing a problem. And I was about to stop being convenient. I didn't resign. That was the first thing I decided. People assume the cleanest exit is the strongest move. It isn't. Not when the ground beneath you is still shifting and everyone else is pretending nothing changed. The morning after the dinner, I showed up to the office at 8:03 a.m., the same time I always did. I swiped my badge. The light turned green. That small permission felt almost insulting. Inside, nothing looked different. The bullpen hummed, phones rang, dispatch screens glowed with moving freight across the Midwest. My team nodded as I passed, some smiling, some avoiding my eyes. They knew something was off. They just didn't know what. At my desk, I logged in and immediately hit the wall Daniel Whitmore had quietly built. My access to carrier rate negotiations was gone. So was approval authority on staffing schedules. I could still see data. I just couldn't touch it. A spectator in my own system. At 9:15, my assistant, Megan Porter, hovered at my cubicle. "Daniel wants to see you," she said softly. Megan had been with me since the company had 12 employees and a folding table for a break room. She didn't look confused. She looked apologetic. I stood and walked to the glass conference room. Daniel was already there, scrolling his phone. He didn't stand when I entered. "Morning," he said casually. "We're just aligning roles." "By email," I replied. He smiled like I was being unreasonable. "You know how fast things move," he said. "This isn't personal." "It never is," I said. He leaned back. "We're bringing in a consultant," he continued. "Someone with experience scaling operations. You'll report to him for now." "For now," I repeated. Daniel nodded. "It'll take pressure off you." That word again. Pressure. I studied him. The confident posture, the certainty that came from being supported, not questioned. "When does the board discuss this?" I asked. He blinked. "They already did." "When?" I asked. "Yesterday," he said. "After dinner." So that was the meeting I wasn't invited to. "Who voted?" I asked. He hesitated, just a fraction. "Dad and I," he said. "And the outside advisors?" I asked. "They deferred," he replied. "Deferred." I left the room without another word. Back at my desk, I opened my notebook and wrote one sentence. "They are not afraid I'll fail. They are afraid I won't." That realization didn't arrive dramatically. It settled. Heavy. Certain. By noon, word had spread enough that people started asking careful questions. "Are you still leading the Midwest Optimization Project? Should we still route approvals through you? Do you want to be CC'd?" I answered the same way every time. "For now, yes." That phrase became my shield. Mid-afternoon, I received a calendar invite from someone I didn't recognize. Evan Marshall, Senior Operations Consultant. The meeting title read, Introduction and Alignment. I looked him up. Evan Marshall had never worked in logistics. He came from retail process management and had been consulting for less than 2 years. Daniel hadn't brought in experience. He'd brought in obedience. The meeting was polite. Evan spoke confidently but vaguely. He asked surface-level questions. He took notes like he already knew the answers. At one point, he said, "We'll need to simplify your systems. Make them more intuitive." "My systems are intuitive," I replied. "They just require understanding." Daniel laughed. "Lauren gets attached," he said. "Don't take it personally." I watched Evan nod, grateful not to challenge the CEO. That night, I stayed late. Not to work. To observe. I watched how decisions flowed around me now. How approvals rerouted. How small inefficiencies crept in where precision used to live. I noted everything. At 8:47 p.m., Megan stopped by my desk again. "You okay?" she asked. "I'm fine," I said. She hesitated. "People are nervous," she said. "They trust you." "I know," I replied. She lowered her voice. "If you need anything," she said, "I'm here." I thanked her. At home, I opened my laptop again. This time, I didn't document conversations. I documented ownership. I pulled in corporation records, early filings, emails from the first year, agreements I drafted that never made it into contracts. I saw it clearly then. Whitmore Logistics Group wasn't just a company. It was a family myth. Daniel was the face. Our father was the authority. I was the engine. Engines don't get credit. They get replaced. The next week brought the first real consequence. A hospital shipment in Indiana was delayed 6 hours due to a routing change Evan approved without understanding carrier constraints. The client was furious. Daniel called an emergency meeting. "Lauren," he said, "can you explain why this happened?" Every eye turned to me. I didn't answer immediately, because this was the test. I could absorb the blame and preserve the illusion, or I could let the truth breathe. "That decision didn't come through my team," I said calmly. "I flagged the risk last week." Daniel frowned. "This isn't the time," he said. "It's exactly the time," I replied. Silence spread through the room. Our father cleared his throat. "Let's focus on solutions," Thomas Whitmore said. "Not fault." I nodded. "Then restore operational authority," I said. Daniel shook his head. "That's not happening." The meeting ended without resolution. Afterward, Evan avoided me. Daniel avoided me. My father avoided me. The company kept moving, less smoothly. I felt something else shift then. Not anger, resolve. They thought sidelining me would quiet things down. Instead, it sharpened every edge. Because when you remove the person holding things together, the cracks don't disappear. They spread, and I was done covering them. The second week after I was sidelined, the company started bleeding quietly. Not money. Not yet. Credibility. It showed up in small places. A missed pickup window in Toledo. A carrier double-booked in Peoria. A customs clearance delayed because a form was filed using an outdated compliance code. None of these would have happened 6 months earlier. I knew because I'd designed the safeguards. Now I watched them being bypassed. Daniel Whitmore held daily alignment huddles without me. Evan Marshall chaired them with a confidence that came from never having to answer for consequences. My team was still technically mine, but decisions were routed above my head, then dropped back down like orders from nowhere. That kind of structure breeds fear. At 10:22 a.m. on a Wednesday, Megan Porter sent me a message. "Do you have a minute? Private?" I told her to meet me in the stairwell. She came down 2 flights, holding her tablet like a shield. "They're changing the routing logic," she said, not bothering with preamble. "Evan approved it this morning." "Based on what?" I asked. She swallowed. "Cost reduction. He says it'll look better to the board." "It will fail in peak congestion," I said. "I know," she replied. I tried to explain. I nodded. "Thank you for telling me," I said. She didn't look relieved. "They're documenting everything now," she added. "Every delay, every client complaint. And they're attaching your name." That was the moment I understood the full shape of the trap. I wasn't being removed. I was being rewritten. They needed me visible enough to blame, absent enough to silence. I didn't confront Daniel. Not yet. Instead, I started keeping 2 records. The first was operational. Dates, decisions, approvals, names. The second was personal. Conversations, tone shifts, who looked away, who spoke over whom. Patterns don't lie. Friday afternoon, Daniel called me into his office. He stood this time. That felt deliberate. "We need to talk about optics," he said. "Go on," I replied. "Some people are confused about your role," he said. "They still see you as leadership." I waited. "That undermines the transition," he continued. "So we need you to recalibrate." "Meaning?" I asked. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Let Evan lead." "Publicly," he said. "Internally, too." "And if I don't?" I asked. Daniel sighed. "Lauren, don't make this harder than it needs to be," he said. "You've always struggled with letting go. Letting go of something I built." I nodded slowly. "Is this coming from you?" I asked. "Or from Dad?" He didn't answer right away. "That tells me enough," I said. That night, my mother, Patricia Whitmore, called. She never called me during work hours. She waited until evening, when people were tired and more pliable. "Daniel says you're unhappy," she said gently. "I'm observant," I replied. She ignored that. "You've always had trouble trusting leadership," she continued. This is why it's hard for people to rely on you. I stared at my apartment wall while she spoke. Do you know what Daniel did today? I asked. She hesitated. He's under a lot of pressure, she said. That wasn't an answer, I replied. Lauren, she said sharply, you're not being supportive. There it was. Supportive meant compliant. I have to go, I said, and ended the call. The following Monday, a formal complaint came in from one of our largest medical clients. Not about delays, about transparency. They wanted a meeting, executive level. Daniel scheduled it for Thursday and CC'd me. That was new. In the meeting, the client representative, Dr. Samuel Ortega, spoke calmly. We're seeing inconsistency, he said. Decisions are changing without explanation. That didn't happen before. Daniel smiled. We're scaling, he said. Growing pains. Dr. Ortega looked at me. Lauren, he said, you handled our account during the pandemic. Do these changes concern you? The room froze. Every eye turned. This was another test. I could protect Daniel. Or I could tell the truth. Yes, I said. They do. Daniel cleared his throat. Lauren, these systems are sensitive, I continued evenly. They require continuity. Rapid changes without data increase risk. Dr. Ortega nodded slowly. That aligns with what we're seeing, he said. After the meeting, Daniel didn't speak to me. Neither did my father. Instead, HR emailed me a performance review request. Voluntary, anonymous, time-stamped. They were building a paper trail. That night, I met with someone I hadn't spoken to in years. My aunt, Rebecca Whitmore, my father's younger sister, worked as a labor attorney in Cincinnati. We met for dinner halfway between our cities. I didn't dramatize. I laid out facts. She listened quietly. Fork paused midair more than once. When did you sign your employment agreement? She asked. 6 years ago, I said. And you never amended it? She asked. No, I replied. She nodded. They set you up, she said. I know, I replied. She leaned back. But here's the thing, she said. They underestimated you. How? I asked. They think this ends with you leaving quietly, she said. They don't see what you still control. What do I control? I asked. She smiled slightly. The truth, she said. And timing. As I drove home that night, the city lights blurred past my windshield. For the first time since the email, I wasn't reacting. I was planning. Because if they wanted to turn me into a liability, I would let them, just not in the way they expected. And when the moment came, it wouldn't be loud. It would be undeniable. The performance review request sat unopened in my inbox for 2 days. I didn't decline it. I didn't complete it. I wanted to see who would blink first. On Wednesday morning, Evan Marshall scheduled a mandatory operations overhaul meeting. The invite went to everyone except me. Megan Porter forwarded it within minutes. They're changing the on-call escalation tree, she whispered over Slack. They're removing your name. I closed my eyes. That's fine, I typed back. Document everything. By noon, my calendar was empty in a way it had never been before. No approvals, no check-ins, no crisis calls. Just a hollow quiet that felt intentional. At 1:07 p.m., Daniel Whitmore sent a company-wide email. Subject, leadership update. He praised collaboration. He thanked teams for flexibility. He announced that Evan Marshall would assume full operational oversight, effective immediately. My name appeared once. Lauren Whitmore will transition into a strategic support role. Strategic support. That phrase meant nothing, which was the point. The humiliation wasn't private anymore. It was clean, corporate, polite enough to be deniable. My phone buzzed. Texts from team leads, from dispatchers, from analysts who had worked under me for years. What does this mean? Are you leaving? Who do we report to now? I answered the same way each time. Nothing changes today. That was true. What changed was coming. At 3:42 p.m., an urgent issue surfaced in St. Louis. A temperature-controlled shipment carrying oncology drugs was flagged for potential spoilage due to a carrier reassignment Evan approved that morning. Megan called me directly. They want your input, she said. But Evan told them not to contact you. I stood up from my desk. Put me on speaker, I said. She hesitated. He's in the room, she said. Then this will be efficient, I replied. The call connected. I recognized voices immediately. Operations supervisors. Quality assurance. Evan. Lauren, Evan said, surprised. This isn't necessary. It is, I said calmly. The drugs will breach temperature tolerance in 42 minutes unless you reroute to carrier 17B. That option increases cost, Evan replied. It prevents patient harm, I said. Silence. Daniel's voice cut in. We're handling this, he said. Please step back. I paused. Document that decision, I said, and the rationale. The line went dead. I sat back down. At 5:18 p.m., the client called. They didn't ask for Daniel. They asked for me. Dr. Samuel Ortega again. His voice was controlled, but tight. We were told this is resolved, he said. Is it? No, I replied. Not yet. I thought you were no longer involved, he said. I'm not, I replied. But I'm still accountable to reality. I walked him through the risks, the options, the timelines. When I finished, he exhaled. We'll take the reroute, he said, at our expense. But we'll need documentation. I'll send it, I replied. I CC'd Daniel and Evan. The drugs arrived intact. That should have been the end of it. It wasn't. The next morning, HR called me in. The representative, Karen Ellis, spoke carefully. There have been concerns about your communication style, she said. From whom? I asked. She avoided my eyes. Leadership, she said. Daniel Whitmore? I asked. She nodded. And Evan Marshall? I asked. Yes, she said. Anyone else? I asked. She shook her head. They've expressed that your involvement creates confusion, she continued. Confusion about what? I asked. Authority, she said. I smiled. That confusion didn't exist until I was removed, I said. Karen shifted in her chair. This is an informal conversation, she said quickly. I'm documenting it anyway, I replied. Her face tightened. That afternoon, my father, Thomas Whitmore, asked me to come to his office. Not the corporate one, his personal one. The walls were lined with plaques and framed headlines. Founder, visionary, leader. He didn't offer me a seat. You embarrassed your brother, he said. I prevented harm, I replied. You undermined him, he said. I corrected a mistake, I replied. He stared at me. You've always needed to be right, he said. I met his gaze. I've always needed things to work, I said. He turned away. This company is Daniel's future, he said. You should respect that. And what is it to me? I asked. He didn't answer. Support, he said finally. You should support him. There it was again. Support meant silence. That night, I received a call from an unfamiliar number. This is Lila Chen, the woman said. I'm with the Ohio Department of Transportation. My spine straightened. We're conducting a routine audit of freight compliance reporting, she continued. Your company was flagged for inconsistencies. I didn't speak. We'll need access to operational records, she said, and interviews with key personnel. When? I asked. Monday, she said. After the call ended, I sat still for a long time. Then I forwarded the voicemail to Daniel. His response came 5 minutes later. We'll handle it. That was the moment I knew. They weren't just sidelining me. They were cornered. Because the inconsistencies Lila Chen mentioned didn't come from my systems. They came from the changes made after I was removed. And the audit wouldn't ask who was in charge now. It would ask who was responsible then. I opened my records. Every decision, every approval, every warning ignored. I didn't need to confront anyone. I didn't need to threaten. All I needed was time. And Monday was coming. By Monday morning, the building felt different. Not tense, controlled. The kind of calm that comes when people have already decided what story they're going to tell and just need reality to cooperate. I arrived early, not out of habit, but strategy. At 7:28 a.m., Daniel Whitmore was already in the conference room with Evan Marshall and our father, Thomas Whitmore. The blinds were drawn. The door was closed. I didn't interrupt. I went to my desk, logged in, and opened my records. At 8:01 a.m., Lila Chen from the Ohio Department of Transportation arrived with 2 associates. Professional, neutral, no wasted motion. She checked in with reception, then asked for executive leadership. Daniel met her with a confident smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. I watched from across the floor as he shook her hand. This way, he said. They went into the same conference room. The blinds stayed closed. At 8:17, Megan Porter sent me a message. They asked for historical routing approvals from the last 90 days. I typed back. Which version? She paused, then replied, the pre-transition ones. I smiled. Send them exactly what they requested, I wrote. Nothing more, nothing less. At 9:03, my phone rang. It was Daniel. "Why are they asking about changes you made?" he demanded, skipping any greeting. "They aren't," I replied. "They're asking about changes made after I was removed." "That's not how it looks," he snapped. "Then clarify," I said. He hung up. At 9:26, Lila Chen stepped out of the conference room and approached my desk. "You're Lauren Whitmore," she said. "Yes," I replied, standing. "I'd like to speak with you," she said. Daniel appeared immediately, placing himself between us. "I'm handling this," he said. Lila looked at him calmly. "I'm not asking," she replied. "You were listed as Director of Operations during the period under review." Daniel stiffened. "That's no longer accurate," he said. Lila nodded. "Then we'll need to understand when that changed and how responsibilities were reassigned," she said. Privately, she turned back to me. "10 minutes?" she asked. I nodded. Daniel didn't look at me as we walked away. In the smaller conference room, Lila placed a folder on the table. "We're seeing inconsistencies between reported carrier assignments and actual dispatch records," she said. "That usually points to either system failure or unauthorized overrides." "I didn't authorize overrides," I replied. "I know," she said. "Your name stopped appearing on approval logs 3 weeks ago." She slid a document toward me. "Who approved these?" she asked. I glanced at the names. Evan Marshall, Daniel Whitmore. "Were you aware of these changes?" she asked. "I flagged the risks in writing," I said. She nodded. "Do you have that documentation?" she asked. "I do," I replied. I handed her a printed packet. Time-stamped emails, risk assessments, internal warnings. She skimmed quickly. "This is thorough," she said. "It needed to be," I replied. When we exited the room, Daniel was waiting. "This meeting is over," he said sharply. Lila looked at him. "No," she said. "It isn't." By noon, the audit had expanded. They requested system access, approval histories, change logs. Evan Marshall started sweating. Literally. His voice wavered as he explained cost-saving strategies. Lila asked one question that cut through everything. Who had final authority when these changes were made? Evan looked at Daniel. Daniel looked at our father. Thomas Whitmore spoke. "Daniel did," he said. Silence followed. At 1:14 p.m., Daniel pulled me aside. "What are you doing?" he hissed. "Answering questions," I replied. "You could have warned me," he said. "I did," I replied. His face flushed. "You're enjoying this," he accused. "No," I said. "I'm finished absorbing it." At 2:37, Lila Chen asked for a follow-up interview. With me. Alone. This time, she asked fewer questions. Instead, she explained consequences. "Non-compliance at this level triggers penalties," she said. "Fines, increased oversight. In some cases, suspension of operating licenses." I listened. "Your documentation shows you attempted to prevent this," she continued. "That matters." "What happens next?" I asked. She closed her folder. "That depends on how your company responds," she said. At 4:02 p.m., Daniel called an emergency board meeting. This time, I was invited. We sat around the same table where my authority had been quietly stripped weeks earlier. Daniel spoke first. "This audit is disruptive," he said. "We need unity." I said nothing. Our father looked at me. "You should have come to us," he said. "I did," I replied. "You told me to step back." Evan spoke next. "I was following directives," he said. "From whom?" Lila asked. Daniel didn't answer. I finally spoke. "This isn't about blame," I said. "It's about structure. You removed safeguards without understanding why they existed." Daniel slammed his hand on the table. "This is my company," he said. "I decide how it runs." Lila stood. "Then you'll answer for how it ran," she said. The meeting ended abruptly. By the time I left the building, the sun was setting, casting long shadows across the parking lot. My phone buzzed. A message from my aunt, Rebecca Whitmore. "I heard about the audit. You did exactly what you needed to." I drove home in silence, not relieved, not triumphant, clear, because this wasn't the end. It was the point of no return. Daniel would not forgive this. My parents would not admit fault easily. And the company I helped build was about to face consequences it couldn't explain away. The question wasn't whether they would fall. It was whether they would try to take me down with them. And I was already preparing for that answer. The first call came at 6:18 a.m. I let it ring. The second came 3 minutes later. Then, a text. "We need to talk before this gets worse." It was from Daniel Whitmore. No apology, no greeting, just urgency dressed up as inevitability. I didn't reply. I made coffee, showered, and left my apartment at the same time I always did. Routine had become a form of armor. By the time I arrived at the office, the building was already buzzing. People spoke in lower voices. Doors closed more often. The audit had changed the temperature, and everyone felt it. At 8:09 a.m., HR sent a calendar invite. Subject: Role Clarification Meeting. Attendees: Lauren Whitmore, Daniel Whitmore, Karen Ellis. I forwarded it to Rebecca Whitmore with a single line. "They're moving." Her response came fast. "Don't attend alone." I replied just as quickly. "I won't." I asked Karen Ellis to reschedule and include legal counsel. She agreed without protest. That told me more than any memo could. At 9:30, Lila Chen emailed me directly. "Thank you for your cooperation yesterday. We'll be issuing preliminary findings by end of week. Please preserve all records." Preserve. That word has weight. At 10:14, Evan Marshall walked past my desk and didn't look at me. He hadn't slept. His tie was crooked. His confidence had evaporated overnight. I watched him disappear into Daniel's office. At 11:02, my father arrived. Not in the conference room. At my desk. Thomas Whitmore stood there like he used to when I was a teenager and had disappointed him. Arms crossed, jaw set, voice calm in a way meant to signal authority. "You're hurting this family," he said quietly. I didn't stand. "You're confusing consequence with harm," I replied. He shook his head. "This didn't have to happen," he said. "It already had," I replied. "You just didn't think it would reach you." He leaned closer. "You think the state is on your side?" he asked. "They'll tear everything apart." "They'll tell the truth," I replied. "That's enough." He straightened. "Daniel wants to offer you something," he said. I waited. "A severance," he continued. "A clean exit. In exchange for your cooperation." There it was. "What does cooperation mean?" I asked. He didn't hesitate. "Clarifying that you approve the changes," he said. Publicly. I looked up at him then. "No," I said. He exhaled sharply. "You're being stubborn," he said. "I'm being accurate," I replied. He stared at me for a long moment, then turned and walked away. At noon, Daniel called again. This time, I answered. "Name your price," he said. "I already did," I replied. "Transparency." He laughed, short and humorless. "You think this ends well for you?" he asked. "I think it ends honestly," I replied. He lowered his voice. "You'll never work in this industry again," he said. "I'll make sure of it." I felt nothing. "Then you should start documenting," I replied, "because that sounds like retaliation." The line went dead. At 1:27 p.m., the preliminary findings arrived. Not formally issued. Leaked. Someone forwarded them to the board. The subject line hit my inbox with no commentary. Preliminary Compliance Review Summary. I read it once. Then again. Unauthorized operational overrides. Insufficient documentation for cost-driven routing changes. Increased risk exposure due to removal of escalation safeguards. Responsibility attributed to current executive leadership. Current, not former. Daniel's phone rang across the office. Evans followed. Karen Ellis closed her door. At 2:05, the board meeting was moved up. At 2:30, I was asked to attend again. This time, Rebecca Whitmore joined by video. Daniel looked at her like he'd just noticed a crack in the foundation. "We're here to discuss containment," he began. Rebecca didn't wait. "You're here to discuss liability," she said. "Containment comes later." Daniel bristled. "This is an internal matter," he said. "It stopped being internal when regulators got involved," she replied. Our father rubbed his temples. "Lauren could help smooth this over," he said. Rebecca turned to him. "She already tried," she said. "You told her to step back." Silence settled. Evan spoke, voice thin. "I was acting under direction," he said. "From whom?" Rebecca asked. Daniel didn't answer. I finally spoke. "I'm not interested in revenge," I said. "I'm interested in not being blamed for decisions I didn't make." Daniel snapped his head toward me. "You want your job back?" he asked. "No," I replied. That landed harder than any accusation. "I want my name removed from decisions I didn't authorize," I continued. "And I want it in writing." Rebecca nodded. "That's reasonable," she said. The board members exchanged looks. Not sympathy. Calculation. At 4:11 p.m., HR delivered a draft separation agreement, not severance. A reassignment. Director of Risk and Compliance Advisory. Independent authority. Direct reporting to the board. No operational control. Full access to records. They were trying to use me. Again. I read the document carefully. Then I closed it. "I decline," I said. Daniel stared. "You're insane," he said. "I'm done," I replied. At 5:02 p.m., I submitted my resignation. Effective immediately. No speech. No explanation. Just facts. I walked out with a box I didn't need because I'd already taken everything that mattered. That night, my mother, Patricia Whitmore, called. I didn't answer. She left a voicemail. We never meant for it to go this far. I saved it, not to punish her, to remember. Because people always say they didn't mean to. They just didn't stop themselves. By the end of the week, Whitmore Logistics Group was under formal review. Contracts were paused. Clients requested assurances. Daniel stopped calling. My father stopped pretending. And I sat in my apartment, laptop open, drafting something new. Not a complaint. A plan. Because stepping away from what you built doesn't make you small. It makes room. And I was about to decide what filled it next. The morning after I resigned, I woke up before my alarm. Not from anxiety. From habit. My phone was silent. No alerts. No overnight escalations. No dashboards waiting for review. The absence felt unnatural. Like a limb gone quiet after years of constant use. I made coffee and opened my laptop anyway. Not to check email, to build something. By 9 a.m., the industry had already noticed. A former client texted first, then a carrier rep, then a compliance officer I'd worked with during the early pandemic days. "Heard you left. You okay? Are you consulting now? If you are, we should talk." I didn't answer immediately. I let the messages stack. I needed to be deliberate, not reactive. At 10:17, my aunt Rebecca Whitmore called. "They're scrambling," she said without greeting. "Daniel is trying to pin everything on Evan. Evan is threatening to cooperate fully." "That won't save them," I replied. "No," she agreed. "But it might slow the bleeding." "Not my problem," I said. She paused. "Good," she said. "Because I have something you should see." She forwarded me an email chain. It was between Daniel Whitmore, my father, Thomas Whitmore, and an outside PR firm. The subject line read, "Narrative Strategy, Regulatory Review." I read slowly. They were planning to position the audit as a legacy system issue, something inherited, something transitional. And my name appeared exactly once. Lauren's operational intensity created rigidity that limited adaptability. There it was. Not blame. Reframing. "She's preparing a defense," Rebecca said. "And they're setting you up as the reason things had to change." "They're too late," I replied. "Are you sure?" she asked. "I'm not in the building anymore," I said. "But I'm not invisible." That afternoon, I took a meeting at a coffee shop in German Village with a woman named Naomi Kessler. She was Chief Compliance Officer at a regional healthcare distributor and had worked with me years earlier. She didn't waste time. "I need someone who understands logistics from the inside," she said. "Not theory, not buzzwords." I nodded. "Temporary," she continued. "High risk. Regulatory cleanup." I smiled slightly. "Those are my specialties," I said. She slid a folder across the table. 3 months, she said. 180,000. Independence, guaranteed. I didn't negotiate. I accepted. By the time I left the cafe, my phone buzzed again. Daniel Whitmore. I didn't answer. He texted instead. "We need to talk. They're dragging your name into this." I replied with one line. "Then stop using it." His response came seconds later. "You're burning bridges." I looked at the screen, then typed back. I already crossed the river. That night, the first article appeared. Not a headline. A trade publication. Logistics Weekly Review. Whitmore Logistics under state review amid leadership transition. My name appeared once. Former Director of Operations. No accusations. No commentary. Just fact. The next morning, the second article ran. Then, the third. Each one peeled back a layer. Daniel gave an interview that didn't land the way he expected. He spoke too much. He contradicted himself. He blamed process without understanding. People noticed. At noon, Evan Marshall resigned. That afternoon, I received an email from Lila Chen. "We may need a follow-up statement from you. Let me know availability." I replied with 2 words: anytime. Documented. By Friday, my mother finally came to my apartment. Patricia Whitmore stood in the hallway, eyes rimmed red, posture defensive. "You could have stopped this," she said. I didn't invite her in. "You could have listened," I replied. She shook her head. "Your brother is under investigation," she said. "Your father's health isn't good." "That's unfortunate," I said. She flinched. "You're cold," she said. "No," I replied. "I'm clear." She looked at me like she wanted to argue, then didn't. "What do you want?" she asked. I considered the question. "Nothing," I said. "That's the point." She left without another word. Over the next 2 weeks, my consulting role expanded. Naomi Kessler introduced me to 2 more firms, then 3, each one dealing with fallout from poorly managed growth and executive overreach. I didn't advertise. My reputation did. One afternoon, I received a call from a journalist. "I'm writing a piece on women pushed out during corporate family transitions," she said. "Your name came up." I declined. Not because I was afraid, because timing matters. Then, on a Tuesday evening, my father called. Not my mother. Not Daniel. Thomas Whitmore. His voice was tired. Older. "They're asking about your role," he said. "The board, the state." "They should answer honestly," I replied. "You could help," he said quietly. I closed my eyes. "I already did," I said. "You told me to step back." Silence. "I was wrong," he said. That was new. "I know," I replied. "What happens now?" he asked. I thought of the company, the people still inside, the systems I built. "I keep moving forward," I said. "You deal with what you chose." The line went dead. That night, I stood on my balcony and looked out over Columbus, lights stretching into the distance. I didn't feel victorious. I felt unburdened. The company I helped build was no longer mine to save, but the work I was meant to do was just beginning. And the next time my family heard my name, it wouldn't be as a liability. It would be as the person who walked away clean and didn't look back. The first subpoena arrived on a Thursday. Not dramatic, not threatening, just official. It was addressed to me personally, delivered by certified mail, requesting testimony regarding operational decision-making during the last 6 months of my tenure at Whitmore Logistics Group. I read it once, then set it down. This was always where it was going to end up. I forwarded it to Rebecca Whitmore with a short note. "Received. Ready." Her reply came back almost immediately. "Good. We'll control the sequence." Sequence mattered more than content now. The following Monday, I sat across from a state investigator in a neutral office downtown. No Whitmore branding, no family photographs, just fluorescent lights and a recorder placed carefully between us. Lila Chen was there again, along with a senior investigator named Mark Feldman. They didn't ask emotional questions. They asked precise ones. On what date was your operational authority limited? Who instructed IT to change access permissions? Did you approve cost-based routing overrides after that date? I answered calmly, factually, with dates. When they showed me printed emails, I confirmed authorship. When they showed me approvals, I identified signatures. At one point, Mark Feldman leaned back in his chair. "You documented this unusually well," he said. "I was trained to," I replied, "in case something went wrong." Lila met my eyes. "And did you believe something would?" she asked. "Yes," I said. The moment safeguards were removed. That interview lasted 3 hours. When it ended, they thanked me, not politely, sincerely. Outside, the sky was low and gray. I stood on the sidewalk for a moment, letting the cold ground me. I didn't feel vindicated. I felt finished. 2 days later, Daniel Whitmore was placed on administrative leave. The board announcement was brief, temporary, pending review. My phone lit up with messages I didn't read. Then one came from an unknown number. It was Evan Marshall. "We should talk. I'm cooperating." I didn't respond. Cooperation is loud when it's late. That Friday evening, my consulting client, Naomi Kessler, invited me to dinner. Not to celebrate, to plan. "You're about to become very visible," she said. "I know," I replied. "Some people will want your version," she continued. "Some will want to shape it." "I'm not interested in shaping," I said. Just accuracy. She smiled. That's why you'll be fine, she said. Over the next week, more things surfaced. An internal memo Daniel had written, suggesting aggressive cost cuts without regard for legacy and efficiencies. A presentation Evan had prepared, recommending removal of escalation layers to streamline accountability. A note from my father approving temporary authority realignment. None of it mentioned me as decision-maker. All of it mentioned speed. The story they'd planned unraveled under its own weight. Meanwhile, my new work took shape quickly. Naomi introduced me to a federal compliance consultant in Chicago, then to a legal team in Minneapolis, dealing with a class action suit related to supply chain negligence. I wasn't applying for jobs. I was being called into situations that needed someone calm when systems failed. One afternoon, after a 12-hour review session, I sat alone in my hotel room and realized something quietly important. No one here knew my family. No one cared. They only knew my work. That was freedom. The next escalation came unexpectedly. My mother, Patricia Whitmore, showed up at my apartment again. This time, she didn't accuse. She pleaded. They're talking about criminal exposure, she said, sitting rigidly on my couch. Your brother could lose everything. I didn't interrupt. You could help mitigate, she continued. Just contextualize. Say it was chaotic. Say everyone made mistakes. I studied her face. Did Daniel make mistakes? I asked. Yes, she said quickly. Did you support him when he removed my authority? I asked. She hesitated. Yes, she whispered. Then this is the context, I said. Her shoulders slumped. You're choosing yourself over family, she said. I shook my head. No, I replied. I'm choosing truth over protection. She left quietly. 2 days later, my father called. This time, there was no strategy in his voice, just exhaustion. They asked me why we didn't listen to you, he said. What did you say? I asked. That I thought I knew better, he replied. I didn't respond. I was wrong, he said again. And now it's too late. Yes, I replied. It is. The formal findings were released the following week. Regulatory violations, leadership accountability, mandated oversight. Daniel's name appeared prominently. Mine appeared once. Former Director of Operations. No fault attributed. That line mattered. The board issued a statement distancing itself from prior operational decisions. Daniel resigned 3 days later. No farewell email. No thank you. Just silence. I learned about it from a news alert. That night, I poured a glass of water and stood by my window, watching traffic move steadily below. I didn't feel satisfaction. I felt closure. Because revenge wasn't what this was. This was gravity. You remove support beams, structures collapse. Not because someone pushed them, because they were never meant to stand alone. My phone buzzed. A message from Rebecca. It's over. You're clear. I replied with one word. Good. The next chapter of my life was already unfolding, and it didn't include explanations, just choices. The first invitation arrived in the mail. Actual paper, thick stock, embossed logo. The Whitmore Logistics Group annual stakeholder dinner. It was scheduled for a Friday evening in late October, downtown Columbus, at a hotel ballroom I knew too well. I'd helped negotiate that venue contract 3 years earlier. My name wasn't on the invite, but a handwritten note was clipped to it. Lauren, it would mean a lot if you came. Mom. I stared at it longer than necessary. Daniel Whitmore had resigned. The board had restructured. External oversight was in place. On paper, the crisis phase was over. This dinner wasn't about business. It was about optics. They wanted a picture, a story, a suggestion of unity. They wanted me visible, but silent. I placed the invitation in a drawer and didn't respond. 2 days later, my phone rang. It was Thomas Whitmore. Just come, he said without greeting. People will ask questions. They already have answers, I replied. They want reassurance, he said. Then reassure them, I said. I'm not your symbol. Silence stretched between us. This family is unraveling, he said finally. It unraveled when you chose hierarchy over honesty, I replied. I hung up before he could answer. That afternoon, I met with Naomi Kessler again, this time in Chicago. We sat across from each other in a quiet restaurant near the river. Papers spread between us. You're being talked about, she said. I know, I replied. Some of it isn't kind, she added. I'm not surprised, I said. She studied me. You could control the narrative, she said. One interview, one statement. I'm not interested in redemption arcs, I replied. Only accuracy. She nodded slowly. That's riskier, she said. I know, I replied. The dinner went on without me. Photos appeared online the next morning. Smiling executives, reassuring statements, a carefully worded speech from the interim CEO about resilience and learning. My mother stood beside my father in every picture. Daniel wasn't mentioned. Neither was I. That was fine. 3 days later, the second invitation arrived. This one wasn't formal. It was a subpoena. Civil. Daniel Whitmore was being sued by 2 former clients for negligence and breach of contract. His attorneys were seeking depositions from anyone involved in operational oversight during the transition period, including me. Rebecca Whitmore reviewed the request and smiled thinly. They're desperate, she said. They want to muddy timelines. I won't speculate, I said. You won't need to, she replied. You documented. The deposition was scheduled for November 12th. I arrived early, dressed plainly. No statement outfit, no symbolism, just professionalism. Daniel arrived late. He looked smaller than I remembered. Not physically, energetically. The confidence he'd worn like armor had thinned. He didn't look at me. When the questioning began, his attorney tried to reframe decisions as collaborative, fast-moving, consensus-driven. Then my turn came. Ms. Whitmore, the opposing counsel said, were you involved in approving the routing changes that led to the client losses? No, I replied. Were you consulted? No. Did you object? Yes. How? I slid copies of emails across the table. Time-stamped. Acknowledged. Ignored. Daniel shifted in his seat. The attorney glanced at the documents, then back at me. Did anyone instruct you to stop raising concerns? Yes, I replied. Who? My brother, Daniel Whitmore. Daniel's attorney objected. The record stood. Afterward, Daniel followed me into the hallway. Are you satisfied? He asked quietly. No, I replied. He frowned. Then what is this? He demanded. This is consequence, I said. Not revenge, he scoffed. You always needed to win, he said. I looked at him. I needed things not to break, I replied. You needed to be in charge. He said nothing. 2 weeks later, the lawsuit settled. Daniel paid quietly. The company issued no statement. The industry moved on. Life has a way of doing that once the noise fades. That Thanksgiving, I spent the holiday alone, by choice. I cooked a small meal. I turned my phone off. I walked along the river as the city emptied. For the first time, the absence of family pressure didn't feel like punishment. It felt like space. If you've been listening this far, if you've ever been asked to re-enter a story just to make it look better for someone else, pause here. Like the video. Comment if you've lived it. Subscribe if you want stories that don't confuse silence with weakness. December came quietly. So did an email from the board, not Whitmore's. Another company. They'd heard about my work through the audit, through the cleanup, through the refusal to spin. They were looking for someone to design compliance systems from the ground up. Permanent. Independent. With authority written in. I accepted. Not because it felt like victory, but because it felt aligned. On Christmas morning, my mother sent a single text. We miss you. I stared at it for a long moment. Then I replied, I'm well. That was all. Because missing someone isn't the same as respecting them. And I was done confusing the two. The year was ending, but the reckoning wasn't. It was simply changing hands. January stripped the city down to essentials. Cold sidewalks, short days, fewer excuses. I started my new role the second week of the year. The company was called Northline Compliance Systems, headquartered in Minneapolis, operating nationally but deliberately quiet. They didn't want headlines. They wanted stability. My title was Principal Architect of Regulatory Operations. It wasn't symbolic. I had authority written into my contract. Independent reporting, final say on system safeguards, a compensation package that reflected risk, not loyalty. The first morning, I sat alone in a glass office overlooking the river and read through their last 2 audit failures. The mistakes were familiar. Speed prioritized over structure. Confidence mistaken for competence. I knew how to fix that. What surprised me was how quickly my former life tried to follow. 3 days in, an email arrived from Whitmore Logistics Group's interim legal counsel. Subject: request for clarification. They wanted a statement. not testimony, not evidence, tone. They were preparing to renegotiate contracts and wanted language that distanced the company from prior leadership decisions without implying systemic failure. They wanted my words. I forwarded it to Rebecca Whitmore. Her response was immediate. Do not engage. Silence is not consent. I agreed. An hour later, my mother called. I didn't answer. She left a voicemail. Your father's blood pressure is high, Patricia Whitmore said. This stress isn't good for him. I deleted it. Not because I didn't care, because I recognized the pattern. Concern had always arrived carrying obligation. At work, the days filled quickly. Meetings that mattered, decisions that held, people who asked questions and waited for answers, instead of talking over them. During a review session, the CEO, Michael Trent, leaned back in his chair and said something unexpected. You don't seek validation, he observed. You assume responsibility and move. I nodded. That's because I've seen what happens when people confuse leadership with approval, I said. He smiled slightly. We're glad you're here, he said. So was I. Mid-month, Daniel Whitmore's name surfaced again. Not directly. A recruiter reached out, asking if I'd be willing to provide context regarding a former executive's leadership style. I declined politely. Not my role. Not my story to rescue. 2 days later, Daniel emailed me himself. No subject line. Just a sentence. You didn't have to go this far. I stared at the screen. Then I replied, I didn't go anywhere. You did. He didn't respond. That weekend, I visited Rebecca in Cincinnati. We cooked dinner together, something we hadn't done since before everything unraveled. You okay? She asked, passing me a glass of wine. Yes, I said, and meant it. She studied me. You've changed, she said. I've clarified, I replied. She nodded. They may try one last time, she said. Families often do when control slips. I know, I replied, and they did. The following Thursday, a letter arrived at my apartment from my parents, handwritten. Careful, they wanted to meet. Neutral ground, a conversation, closure. I didn't answer immediately. I let the letter sit on the counter overnight. In the morning, I read it again. There was no apology. There was no acknowledgement. Only fatigue. Loss. A request framed as peace. I wrote my response on the clean sheet of paper. I am not available to meet. I wish you health. Please respect my decision. I mailed it without adding anything else. That afternoon, Lila Chen emailed me. Just checking in. We've closed the Whitmore file. Your cooperation was noted. Closed. That word mattered. In February, Northline launched the first phase of the compliance overhaul I'd designed. The systems held under pressure. The audit passed without conditions. At the internal announcement, Michael Trent credited the team. He didn't single me out. I appreciated that. Recognition without extraction is rare. That night, I went home and opened a folder I hadn't touched in months. Old notes, early documentation, emails from the first days of Whitmore Logistics Group. I didn't feel anger reading them. I felt distance. The woman who wrote those emails had been careful, capable, unprotected. I closed the folder and deleted it. Not to erase the past, to stop carrying it. Spring crept in slowly. Snow receded. Sidewalks softened. People looked up again. One evening, I ran into Naomi Kessler by chance at an industry mixer. She hugged me briefly. You landed clean, she said. I landed honest, I replied. She smiled. That lasts longer, she said. As I walked home that night, phone buzzing with updates I no longer felt compelled to answer immediately, I understood something quietly important. Walking away hadn't been the brave part. Staying aligned afterward was. Because when the noise dies down and the roles dissolve, what's left is the person you've chosen to be when no one is watching. And I was finally comfortable with her. There was still one conversation left, not with my family, with myself. And it was coming. The conversation didn't arrive the way I expected. There was no knock on the door, no late-night call, no dramatic confrontation waiting in a parking lot. It came on a quiet Sunday morning while I was folding laundry. My phone buzzed once. An email notification from Patricia Whitmore. No subject line. I stared at it for a long moment before opening it, already recognizing the pattern. My mother never used subject lines when she wanted the message to feel personal, intimate, unofficial, as if that softened what followed. Lauren, I've been thinking a lot about everything, about where we went wrong, about how much time we've lost. I don't want us to end like this. I'm asking, as your mother, if we can sit down and talk. No lawyers, no business, just family. I read it twice. Not for meaning, for absence. There was still no apology, no acknowledgement of specific harm, no ownership, just longing, wrapped in nostalgia, as if time itself had been the only aggressor. I closed my phone and finished folding the towels. That was the moment I noticed how calm I felt. No spike of anger, no urge to explain, no internal debate about whether I was being unfair, just clarity. I went for a walk along the river, the air cold but clean. The city was quiet in that early, in-between way. I let my thoughts move freely, not circling the same old questions, but landing somewhere new. I realized something uncomfortable. My family hadn't changed their behavior because they understood it was wrong. They'd changed because it stopped working. The pressure, the silence, the assumptions that I would eventually bend, those tools had failed. And now they wanted a softer entry point. I stopped walking and sat on a bench, watching the water move steadily past. It didn't rush. It didn't hesitate. It didn't look back. That night, I drafted a response. Not emotional, not cold. Exact. Mom, I understand your desire to talk. I don't share it. What happened wasn't a misunderstanding, and it isn't resolved by conversation alone. I'm choosing distance because it's what allows me to live honestly. Please respect that. I didn't send it right away. I waited until the next morning because timing, I'd learned, matters almost as much as content. At work, something shifted that week, not externally, internally. During a planning session, a junior analyst challenged one of my assumptions. Not aggressively, thoughtfully. The room waited. I listened. Then I said, "You're right. Let's adjust." The analyst looked startled, relieved. After the meeting, Michael Trent stopped by my office. "You model something rare," he said. "Authority without defensiveness." I smiled. "I had to unlearn the opposite," I replied. That evening, I received a text from Rebecca Whitmore. "Did you respond to your mom?" "Yes," I typed. "Good," she replied. "However it lands, it's clean." Clean. That word stayed with me. A few days later, the last attempt came. Not from my parents, from Daniel. The message was short, sent late. "I'm starting over. I just wanted you to know." I read it without reacting. Then I typed one sentence. "I hope you do it honestly." That was it. No reopening, no absolution, no bitterness, just truth. After I sent it, I felt something close. Not dramatically, gently, like a door finally settling into its frame. I spent the rest of the evening organizing my apartment, throwing out old notebooks, shredding papers I no longer needed, making room in drawers and shelves and corners I'd ignored for years. When I finished, I stood in the middle of my living room and looked around. Everything in it reflected who I was now, not who I had been trying to be for others. That night, I slept deeply, without dreams. The next morning, I woke up knowing there was nothing left to explain. The final chapter wouldn't be about confrontation. It would be about what comes after you stop asking for permission to exist fully. And for the first time, I was ready to live there. The last thing to fall into place wasn't dramatic. It was quiet. It happened on an ordinary Tuesday morning in early April, when the city was just beginning to thaw and people were pretending winter hadn't taken something from them. I was standing in my kitchen, reviewing notes for a board presentation, when I realized I hadn't thought about my family in days. Not with effort, not with restraint. They simply hadn't entered my mind. That was how I knew it was over. At Northline Compliance Systems, the work had settled into a rhythm that felt earned. We weren't firefighting anymore. We were building policies that made sense, safeguards that didn't rely on heroics, a structure that didn't collapse when one person needed to step away. During the quarterly review, Michael Trent introduced me to the board, not as a fix, but as a foundation. "This framework will outlast us," he said. "That's the point." I watched the faces around the table. No skepticism, no politics, just assessment and respect. When the meeting ended, one of the board members, a woman named Janet Morales, lingered. "You've been through something," she said. I didn't ask how she knew. "Yes," I replied. "You didn't harden," she observed. You refined. That felt accurate. That afternoon, I signed the final version of a long-term contract. 5 years. Autonomy protected. Exit clauses clear. Authority defined. Nothing ambiguous. I walked home afterward instead of calling a car. The sidewalks were wet with melting snow, and the air smelled like dirt and possibility. I passed people rushing somewhere important to them and felt no need to hurry. At my apartment, there was a package waiting. From Rebecca. Inside was a slim notebook and a short note. For whatever you build next, you earned a clean page. I smiled. That evening, my phone buzzed. A text from my mother. I opened it without tension. I received your message. I don't agree with your choice, but I will respect it. That was new. I didn't respond. Respect doesn't require acknowledgement. 2 weeks later, an industry panel was announced. Compliance leadership. Risk accountability. Women in operational authority. My name was listed as a speaker. I didn't hesitate. On stage, under bright lights, I spoke calmly about systems, about decision-making, about what happens when organizations mistake loyalty for silence. I didn't mention my family. I didn't need to. Afterward, a woman approached me. Late 30s, tired eyes, steady posture. I'm being pushed out of a company my father started, she said. They keep saying it's for my own good. I met her gaze. They always do, I said. What did you do? She asked. I stopped explaining, I replied. And I started choosing. She nodded slowly, like someone filing that away for later. That night, I returned home and opened the notebook Rebecca had sent. On the first page, I wrote 3 lines. I don't negotiate my worth. I don't confuse access with obligation. I don't stay where truth is inconvenient. I closed the notebook. That was enough. In May, I took a week off. No conferences, no audits, no calls. I rented a small cabin near Lake Superior and spent my days walking, reading, cooking simple meals. One evening, as the sun set low over the water, my phone buzzed one last time. Daniel. I stared at the name. Then I turned the phone face down. Not because I was afraid of what he'd say, because the chapter where his voice mattered had already ended. The next morning, I woke early and watched the lake stretch endlessly ahead of me. No borders, no ownership, just movement. I thought about the woman I had been at the beginning of this story. Capable, yes, but waiting, absorbing, believing that patience would eventually be rewarded. It wasn't. Clarity was. Walking away wasn't the revenge. Living well without explanation was. If this story followed you longer than you expected, if it mirrored something you've lived or something you're quietly preparing for, take a moment now. Like the video. Comment if you're ready to choose yourself. Subscribe if you want more stories about boundaries, dignity, and the kind of justice that doesn't need applause. Because sometimes the most powerful ending isn't reconciliation, it's release. And that was mine.